Polaris Quilt-along. My name is Holly Ann Knight, and it is my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. Rockstars, this is our first live Q&A in our 6-week series as we make the Polaris quilt together, and I am so excited to kick this off. Now, I know this is our first day. I know that it can take a minute to find this live, so if you are jumping on, do say hi in the chat so I can greet you. I'm gonna hit refresh over here on my browser so that I can pull up this live any second now. Come on, little Instagram, let me watch online. Oh no. Ba, 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 ba. All right, let me check behind the camera for a second. Technical difficulties. Hello, Lydia. Hello, Susan. Hello, Darlene. I see others as well. Tamara. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Okay, Maggie. Y'all are getting on here. All right, I'm just gonna keep hitting refresh until I can see myself. Well, that's annoying. All right, we're gonna jump in and I will hit refresh again in a moment. Hopefully Instagram has not changed something so that I can't watch from, ooh, I bet I can watch from my iPad. I wanna be able to see the live so that I can answer your questions in real time. That's the sticking point here. So let's see if we can do it over here. If this is not dead. This might be dead. Oh, technology is not my friend today. All right, we'll plug this in and we'll grab it in a minute. Okie dokie. So, as I mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm walking around all behind the camera, and that's a mess. Let's start again, shall we? Technology is being a little bit difficult, so it's going to be a little hard for me to see your questions and comments. We will figure it out, don't you worry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start chit-chatting about all things choosing color and fabric. I'm going to hit refresh over here periodically. Hopefully it'll pop up on my laptop as it usually does. If for some reason it doesn't, we'll grab the iPad in a bit once it's had a chance to charge. Now, those of you who are new to Quilt-alongs with me, let me just review how this works. Usually, you will get an email on Monday mornings. If you're going, wait, how do I sign up for the emails? I'm gonna pop a lot of links into my stories after we finish our time together here. I'll make sure you know where to find our Polaris blog homepage and that sign up so you know how to put your email in. I'll make sure you have a link to the pattern, a link to kits, etc. Okay? Now, normally if you sign up for the Quilt-along, you get an email on Monday, and that talks about what we're gonna be doing that week for the Quilt-along. And it's gonna have blogs and resources so that you feel set up for success, okay? Then on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, we will be here doing this. This is gonna be a Q&A session. I will review everything that was talked about in those blogs. We'll work on those steps together. And any questions that you have, this is a wonderful time to ask them. Obviously, today is an exception because today is, in fact, Monday. That is because on Wednesday, I leave for Chicago. Many of you know I'm running the Chicago Marathon in 6 days. I'm so excited. Thanks to all of y'all, we have raised over $9,200 for Breakthrough T1D for type 1 diabetes research. It's amazing. I cannot wait to run that marathon and celebrate y'all's generosity. So this week is a little bit different that we're meeting here on Monday, but I like to think that that's kind of a good thing because it gives y'all time to think about your colors and fabrics if you haven't gotten them already. If you need to order fabric, you can order it and it'll have time to arrive to you before we start cutting next week, okay? All right, let's hit refresh and see if this has decided to cooperate yet. It really, really doesn't want to. That is just... Oh, I can see it here. Did we find a hack? We found a hack. Okay. Now, hello, Jenny. I'm so glad you're here. How are y'all doing? If you have asked any questions thus far, I can't see them because it only shows me the chat from the point at which I was able to click in. So do me a favor and take a second to say hi again, ask your questions again, and let's make sure that we have all of that covered, okay? Now, during our Quilt-along, the official size that we are making is this one here, okay? This is the, is this an old pattern? No, this is the throw size, the 60 by 72. It is 30 blocks. So enough to be a good cuddle size quilt, not enough to be too overwhelming. Full disclosure, I am probably going to make a bigger quilt because as you can see from this fabric that I have spread out in front of me, I have been collecting some Ruby Star fabric for a very long time, and I have been waiting for it to grow up into a Polaris quilt to go on our queen size bed at home. So just know that as we go along, I'm going to be a little bit ambitious in how much I am planning on sewing. We'll see if I get her done. But this is the official size of our Quilt-along. And this is the size that we've made all of our kits for, okay? Now for this, you need 4 colors. There are 2 colors for each star, so color 1, color 2, color 3 is your cornerstones, and color 4 is your background, okay? I saw a question that came through in the chitty chat, and one of y'all asked, what does WOF mean? That is width of fabric, okay? Which I really thought that we put a note in here that clarified that. And if we missed that, I'm sorry, but that's exactly why we have these Q&As, so that we can catch things like that. So when fabric comes off the bolt, right, it is folded. When it is opened up, that's width of fabric. So that's typically 42 inches, okay? Somewhere in that range, 42, 40, 44, right in that range. So that basically means that as you take your yardage, when we start cutting next week, you'll be cutting strips across that width of fabric before we subcut into smaller sections, okay? I am going to be making a scrappy Polaris quilt. So that means that I'm gonna be using lots and lots of fabrics. My general recommendation, if you are making a pattern scrappy, is to get the prescribed yardage worth of fabric plus 1 fat quarter. So in this instance, we need 2 yards of fabric for this set of star pieces. So if I'm going to do this out of fat quarters, 2 yards would be 8 fat quarters. I would recommend that you have 9, okay? So that's if you want to make it a little bit scrappy. If you want to make it a lot of bit scrappy, you could do what we have done with our kits, okay? And our kits have 1 fat quarter per block, because each block has 2 of these stars in it. So what you'll end up doing is making 15 variations of blocks. Don't worry, we're going to talk about this more in a second. 15 block variations, 2 of each variation for a total of 30 blocks, okay? All right, let's see who's here, and then we're going to talk about some principles of color. Hello, Cindy. Hello, Celeste. T-Squared, Cabello, Charlotte, Lenny, Tamara, Carrie. Oh, let's turn the air off so it's not loud. Whoops. Katarina, Ingrid, April, Smoline, Tay, Ren Collective Quilty Girl. It's so great to see all y'all. Welcome. All right, so we've talked a little bit about how this quilt-along is going to work. We've talked a little bit about how we designed these scrappy kits, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. Let's talk about principles of color and pattern. Now, anytime we are choosing colors for a quilt or we're picking out fabrics, we want to keep in mind value. That's how light or dark the fabrics are. We want to keep in mind color, the actual color that's printed on there and its relationship to other colors. And we want to keep in mind scale. So how big are the prints? Now, my general recommendation is that you keep the scale pretty small for Polaris, because these pieces that we're cutting out are pretty small pieces. So if you have a fabric like this OG Ruby Star ice cream print, right? If I cut this up pretty small, I don't really know what bits I'm gonna get and what color it's gonna look like, right? Because if I cut a 2-inch square and the majority of it has that pink ice cream cone in the middle, then it's gonna read more pink than blue. So I wanna keep that in mind, and thus for a pattern like this, a more traditional style quilt, where the pieces are cut pretty small, I generally recommend going with smaller prints. Big giant asterisk. I obviously broke my own rule, right? Remember, these are more like guidelines than rules anyway. I obviously broke that guideline on this quilt here behind me, okay? I chose some really big ginghams in here. The trade-off is that on some of those blocks, the actual shape of the star is a little fuzzier. The contrast is not as crisp. You can't see those star points quite as well as you could have if that was a more solid reading print. That being said, I completely love how it turned out. I think it adds to some of that homespun feel of this quilt. So all that to say that every guideline has an exception, okay? When it comes to deciding value for this quilt, this is a fairly low volume option. It's obviously not low volume in the strictest sense of the term, but there's not a lot of high contrast moments here. Something like the cover quilt of Polaris, or this quilt that's pictured on the back, these are much higher contrast versions and are generally a safer bet in terms of how they're gonna turn out. You will notice that we went for a little more contrast with this very light background inside this Favorite Flowers kit, or this very dark background inside this Scrappy Ruby Star kit. And that's my general recommendation if you're unsure about how you want to choose colors and fabrics for Polaris, is I recommend that you pick two neutrals, one very light and one very dark. They don't have to be neutrally neutrals, right? Notice that in this instance, we literally used a Kelly green, which is not a neutral color by any stretch of the imagination, but it reads quite solid, especially compared to the prints that we're gonna use as the stars, right? So notice here, I've got a very light and a very dark. Here as well, I've got a very light for my cornerstones in this instance and a very dark for my background. So by picking a very light and a very dark neutral reading kind of fabric, that gives you a starting place with that background and those cornerstones. Keeping those fabrics more constant throughout the quilt is also going to give your eye a place to rest, especially if we're doing a lot of wild and crazy things inside the stars. From that point, you get to decide what to do with your stars. I tend to be drawn to kind of warmer combinations for those stars so they sparkle off a cooler background. If you pick a warmer background, you might pick cooler colors for your stars. And that, again, that begins to play into some of those color relationships as well. So we want to think about creating value contrast. We want to be mindful of the scale of our fabrics. And then we want to think about things like relationships on the color wheels, or even something as simple as that warm-cool contrast when we're picking our colors themselves, okay? Any questions thus far? Good morning, Julian. It's great to see you. There are so many of you. I love that. One other reminder as a brief aside, when we finish here, I'm going to be starting a highlight in my stories where these videos will live. We're also hoping to be able to download these videos and put them on YouTube for you so that if you need to go back and watch the replays at any point, I know this week is a lot of talking about color theory and prints, but when we actually get into tips and tricks for things like cutting and piecing, being able to pause and rewind easily can be very helpful. So do know we're planning to make a playlist over there as well, okay? All right, I'm gonna do a quick review of the kits we currently have available, and I may also run around the shop a little bit and grab some other bundles and make some recommendations as far as fabrics that are already put together for you. Then we're gonna play with my Ruby Star stash here on the table, and we're gonna start pairing up fabrics for my blocks so that you know how you might wanna do that. Because if you get any of these scrappy kits from us, you're gonna have to make some decisions when it arrives to you. We've sent you lots and lots of fabric. You're gonna have to decide how you want it to go together, all right? First one, this is the cover kit. Dun, da, da, da. Okay, and you'll notice that color one is split between two colors, this teal and this yellow. The coral is a constant, and in order to work with those, you simply will just cut half of the color one pieces from the yellow, half from the teal, and then all of the color two pieces from that coral, okay? So if you want something simple and solid and classic, this kit might be for you. I will put links in my stories to all of these for what that's worth, all right? This is the current last Fabulism kit. Y'all, these went like hotcakes at OSQE this week. I was up in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is just outside of Nashville. It was our first time vending at Original Sewing and Quilting Expo. It was my first time teaching there too. We had such a great time. I'm so excited that we're gonna be in Novi, Michigan in a few weeks. And y'all, when I tell you that these kits, this is a kit for a quilt like this one, okay? Went like hotcakes. This is the last one we currently have. We do have a sprout woven that is a very similar color to this, so I'm gonna make some more kits. But yeah, this is a good one. If this catches your fancy, you might wanna snatch it up. Next, we have some Favorite Flowers. This is a very retro kit, right? With this kind of pinky purple background, the bright Kelly green for your cornerstones, and then these very retro pansy colored prints. And finally, again, this is the current last one of these Scrappy Ruby Star kits that we have cut, but we can cut more. This has 30 fat quarters from a bunch of different Ruby Star lines, a speckled for your cornerstones, and then iron Paintbrush Studio solids for the background. This is probably the most similar to what I'm going to be trying to do with my fabrics here, all right? Again, all of these are available in our store. Signing up for the Quilt-along is free. You will need to purchase the pattern. The kits are totally optional, all right? Let's see, do you mark the colors in the kits at just 1, 2? No, I do not, and that's because I'm about to show you what I want you to do with those fat quarters when they arrive to you. Great question. Because basically all of these fat quarters are your colors 1 and 2, and we're gonna talk about how to divide them up. Which, let's do that now. I'm not gonna take a sip of smoothie. Y'all know every time I take a sip of smoothie on camera, I get a blueberry seed in my throat and it's not cute. So let's break this down. Now, we'll borrow this little illustration here so y'all can see it. This is an approximate diagram of how you could put together this Scrappy Ruby Star kit. This is a very similar feel to what I wanna do for my big one, all right? We're gonna start together today by putting together pairs for just 30 blocks. If I follow through on my ambition to make the queen, it'll be at least 64 blocks. If I go all the way and go ham all the way up to king size, I'll need 100 blocks. So obviously that's a lot more than y'all, but we're gonna start by just picking out 30 together, okay? Now that means that I need 30 fabrics, and then I'm gonna put them in pairs, so I will end up with 15 pairs. Out of each pair, and I will review all of this next week, do not panic. Out of each pair, I'm gonna cut out 2 blocks, okay? And the reason for that is because these quarter square triangles are made 2 at a time. All right, so if you're making 1, you're gonna end up making 2, so you might as well make 2 of the same block. All right, okay. So if we're gonna start up in this upper corner with this kind of pinky mauvey situation, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm going to ignore my own guidelines about scale, at least for the sake of this exercise, and then we'll see if I change my mind when I actually get to the cutting part. I'm gonna start, I think, with this lovely little star print, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start making little pairs. And if you got, for example, if you got the Scrappy Polaris block, I went through and I pulled fabrics that match this color pattern. So you could say, okay, I need 2 like pinky mauves. I need 2 more pinky mauves. I need a coral and a pink. And you could match this all the way down, okay? You also can go through and pair them any way you want. You just need to make 15 pairs of fabrics. Okay, so I'm gonna start with that, and then I want a different print for some contrast. So we're gonna go with this little bubba. So this will be my pair 1. Okay, look how cute that's gonna be. That'll be pair 1, and then we're gonna repeat that process again. And I'm gonna start thinking through how I want these colors to kind of march down the quilt a little bit, okay? I have some fat quarters, some fat 8s. We put all fat quarters in our kits, and it's gonna be plenty of fabric, okay? If I had to take a gander, I would say you could pretty easily cut, because let's see, 30 fat quarters is 7.5 yards of fabric. And keep in mind that for those stars, the pattern only calls for 4. So you could probably cut at least 4 blocks out of each fat quarter, right? Which means you're gonna have lots to play around with. So if you start pulling pairs and then you get into actually kind of making it and it isn't looking how you want it to look, you can change your mind and it'll be fine, okay? All right, I'm gonna come over here. Once upon a time, I had all of these fabrics absolutely beautifully laid out in my loft, my sewing loft, so that it would have been a much tidier process to pull these, but that's okay. We're gonna just go with it, all right? Y'all ask questions. I know that fabric can be a more intimidating topic. So ask me all the questions about putting these together. I'm just making pairs right now. The exact order of how they're gonna go into the quilt can get sorted later. Right? I'm making pairs, and then we will make visual decisions visually when it comes to laying out our quilt. Okay, so keep that in mind. You're wanting pairs that look good together, and if you're wanting to do some sort of color wash, then those fabric colors are gonna be kind of close to each other so you can stair step through the rainbow. But how you'll actually arrange the blocks, we will decide when the blocks are made. So you don't have to have the whole vision right now, you just have to take a step towards it. And hopefully that takes some pressure off, because you don't have to have all the answers, okay? You just have to have some thoughts on how you think you want it to go, okay? This is gonna read very cream, so I'm just gonna set that to the side. Same thing here. This would read very, very neutral, so it does not fit within my vision. And keep in mind, I have so much extra fabric sitting in front of me right now. Oh, look how pretty this print is. This is a Jen Hewitt print. I've been collecting Ruby Star, y'all, for years and have not made anything with it. This is my personal stash of goodies here. I think I actually want to swap these. I think I want those to go together and I want these to go together. Yes, I like that. I love these birds. I'm assuming this is Melody from back in the day. Yep, of course it is. We're not surprised. We know what our gal's fabric looks like. Okay, coming back over here, let's get some of these purples. I love these florals. How nice that is. Oh, so good. So good. Let's see, Cindy says, will you try to match the larger print to smaller print or another large print? Great question. So you were very observant, right? Because I made that whole case for why you should stick to smaller prints. And then as you can tell, I grabbed these ice cream cones and immediately broke my own rule, right? I did pair it with something that is a little bit clearer as far as what color it is. Now notice both of these though have kind of pinks, yellows, and oranges. And if I am making this color wash, right in here, I'm gonna need some blocks that are like sorta pink, sorta orange. And that's where this combination is probably going to fall. So I am thinking through about where I may want it to go in my quilt, even if it doesn't eventually ultimately land there. But I'm thinking through that kind of blending of colors if I'm, color washing down a quilt. I'm also thinking, yes, that since I had one kind of big print that's gonna chop up kind of funky, I do want the other one to be a little bit tighter. I think it visually makes more sense that way, personally. And that just, in my mind, it makes my life easier later. If I'm not like, ooh, what was this supposed to be? What's happening here? Great question. Lydia says, so in a color wash, would you potentially pair, say, a yellow-green with a yellow and then again with a green to facilitate the wash? So I may not necessarily pair that same yellow-green with both the yellow and the green, but I might, say, have a yellow and a yellow-green print and then have another yellow-green print that I pair with a green. So like these, let's find a good example. Like these two prints are very close to each other in terms of, one's a little darker than the other, but the color itself, right, is pretty similar. So I'm pairing one of them with something a little pinker, and the other one is probably gonna go with something a little purplier, so that when I put them all together, here, let me find a print, and then I can show you what I mean. Do we want? Yeah, let's go with this one. Right, so then when these all end up in a row, see how I've kind of gone from pink to purple? And these two middle prints fill kind of the same spot so that it steps it through. Don't overthink it though, right? Like kind of follow your instincts on this. You're gonna have a beautiful scrappy quilt at the end. This one was random, okay? So if you're sitting around, going, holy smokes, there's no way I can do this. I'm already overthinking myself into oblivion. One, I would like you to take a deep breath, please. And let me tell you about this quilt. So this quilt, I started cutting out this quilt in May of 2023, so a little over a year ago. And we had gotten in a number of these Fableism lines, and we had been, every time a new collection would come in, we would take a fat quarter bundle and we'd cut into it and make some sample to go around the shop. But what that meant was we had ended up with a whole bunch of like bits of fabric. So in some cases I had, you know, like a fat eighth. In some cases I had a fat quarter minus a chunk. In some cases I had like, you know, a quarter of a fat quarter. And I literally was just like digging through we had this big tray. It wasn't even like it was a tray of the Fableism scraps. And they were the ones that were fair game for making shop samples. And I really wanted to show how these ginghams and stripes and things cut up. Because a lot of folks were coming in and they're going, those fabrics are beautiful, but how is it gonna look all chopped up? Is it gonna look funky if my, you know, stripes aren't all going the same direction kind of thing? And I wanted to demonstrate that no, it was in fact gonna look fabulous. But I didn't have enough of each fabric to do what I'm doing here. Like this is a much more ordered process already, as chaotic as it may feel. In this case, I literally was like, okay, I cut one block's worth out of this fabric. What do I want to put it with, right? So you'll notice this gingham, I had a whole fat quarter because it shows up here and it shows up here. And I had to cut these quarter square triangles in kind of a funky way so that I could do just one of them at a time. So I had enough of this fabric to make 2 blocks, but I didn't necessarily have enough of these fabrics to make 2 blocks, right? So this one was much more random. I literally just went block by block, and look how wonderful it looks. Because if you have nice pairings here, then you can arrange the quilt so it looks great, all right? So at this point, we really and truly just have to worry about like the block level, okay? Susan says, are you also combining light and dark together? I am trying to have a little bit of contrast. I'm not super worried about it because I am going to have a very dark background. Let me grab it. I'm planning to use blackberry for my background, which is very, very dark. So all of these are going to pop up against it. So these pairings in and of themselves can be a little bit lower contrast than this pairing, and it's okay. In this case, there's not a lot of value contrast between the stars and the background, but because the stars are so heavily patterned and the background is solid, it creates that same effect. Great questions. Is anyone in a slight panic and needs a pep talk? I know I said I was gonna make 30 pairs, but I might be getting carried away with some of these. We're gonna see together. I just have so much fabric. But you'll notice, right, if this is my background, I don't know if y'all picked up on this, that I quietly set these guys aside because they're too close, right? I would lose the star and the whole block would just end up looking really, really dark, especially compared to the rest of the quilt. So even though those are some of my favorite prints, they're gonna get saved for a different project. Because they're too close to the background. That's gonna be an interesting activity when we get to my blues here in a second as well, of figuring that out. Now I have paired all of my purples up with each other. Is that too close? Yeah, that's too close. And I have not paired any with my blues, so I'm gonna end up breaking some of these up to work on the blues in just a minute, okay? All right, fold that out of the way. This one is a beautiful print. This is not gonna work for what I'm wanting necessarily because I am trying to have that color wash effect, but it would look stunning in these blocks. I don't know, I say that and then I'm immediately like, actually, maybe that's my stair step between blues and pinks. I might have just changed my mind. It's okay to change your mind. This is not sciencey science, right? This is one of the more art-formy parts of what we do as quilters, right? Like when we're cutting and we're piecing, that's geometry and gets very mathy very quickly. Let's see. Ooh, let's pair these together. Oh, look, see, this is gonna be great. Look at this. Look how fun that's gonna be as a step from our blues down into our purples and pinks. I might change my mind again. I have ideas, okay? Let this be fun. Let it be creative. You're getting to play with fabric, okay? Is this dark enough? Please be dark enough. Yeah, that'll work. We'll pair it with something a little lighter and it will be okay. If you are shopping your stash, let's talk about that for a second, right? So I've been talking about the kits that we've put together. I've been talking about, simply pairing up fat quarters. Let's talk about what you're gonna do if you're shopping your stash, okay? If you are shopping your stash, I would recommend choosing your background first if you can. Your background is going to be your constant. Now, on today's blog, right, I put up a whole blog about thinking through this process. So if you're watching this and you're like, ooh, I need to sit and look at some photos and think about this, I have that resource available for you. On the blog, you will see a version of Polaris that is all kind of icy blues and grays. That is the OG Polaris that I made for my parents. This block was actually a block that I designed for my dad back, gosh, when was that? 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. And I was making a quilt. My dad wanted a quilt. I wanted to actually design the quilt. And that one I did very, very scrappy. That was with a gorgeous Robert Kaufman line way back in the day. And I did a scrappy background. I did scrappy everything. The whole thing was scrappy. I literally went block by block and made it and then figured out how I wanted to pair things up. I love how it turned out. I am also very comfortable with a pretty high level of color chaos when I am working on a quilt. So if you are shopping your stash, you certainly could go full scrappy. If that makes you a little nervous, my recommendation is to pick your background first, okay? Pick that background and then do exactly what I was doing just a minute ago of having it handy that as you choose your star fabrics, you can pair them all up and hold them against each other and make sure that they look the way that you want them to, okay? Right, so being able to take my background and put this on there and go, oh yeah, that's gonna look okay, all right? The other thing that I'm gonna do is notice how these cornerstones touch up against a lot of the star. So since my background is so dark, I will use a pretty bright cornerstone, probably some white and creamy neutrals, so that there is a little bit of a distinction. So where I do have some of these darker prints, it'll still make them a little bit more visible. So once you've picked out your background, I want you to think about those cornerstones. Remember, we talked about having a very dark neutral and a very light neutral. One for your background, one for your cornerstones. It doesn't matter which is which. Then shop your stash, and whether it's finding a fat quarter bundle that you've got hanging around, whether it is pulling from your individual fat quarters, whatever floats your boat, you can start making these pairs and then you'll be able to hold them up against your background and your cornerstones to make sure things look the way that you want them to look, all right? I'm folding these up so that I can start sliding my pairs and start arranging them because I like laying things out and picturing the future. Lisa says, this quilt is so much fun to make. I need to shout out Lisa, and I'm so glad that you're here for this, Lisa. That dark background, the like rainbow Tula Pink Zuma Polaris on a black background that is on the blog. Lisa pieced that quilt, and I got the immense delight of quilting it. Lisa, I still think about how much fun that quilt was to quilt for you. And I'm so glad to hear that you had a great time making it. Are you making another one this time out of curiosity? Let's see. Karen says, this is going to be so much fun to match up fabrics. I bought the Folk and Lore kit and it's gorgeous. Oh, you are one of the lucky ones that snagged one of those kits. If you missed out on the Folk and Lore kits, here, I'll grab the Folk and Lore bundle so you can see. Hi, sweet bean dog. Hi, sweet bean dog. Havana's like, oh, good heavens. Let's see. This is the Folk and Lore bundle. We are out of the kits, though we may make some more. But out of curiosity, let's see. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you went scrappy, 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 you could, in theory, make this whole quilt just with the Fat Quarter bundle. You'd be doing scrappy backgrounds as well. So you may want to get yardage for your background, but food for thought. It is going to be a fun quilt. I really agree, Karen. Yes, Lisa, you're making another one. Okay, which one are you making this time? Or like, what fabrics are you using? What's your theme? What's your vibe? I want to hear about what y'all are planning. What kit did you get? What are you pulling from your stash? Lisa says, I'm supersizing this time. Does that mean you're making the blocks bigger or you're making the quilt really big? Which one are we doing? Look at these pretty dusty blues. I don't know how many of these I'm going to put in this quilt, but wow, they're pretty. We're going to have a couple somewhere. Let me scroll up and make sure I didn't miss any more. Tiger Mama says, I cannot wait to get started on this. Teresa says, thank goodness for the sample pictures, just saying I struggle with color. I know, and that's part of what I'm so excited about with this quilt, y'all, is the last couple of quilt-alongs that we've done, I feel like the color portion has been pretty straightforward, right? Like it's not been, there's been nothing too out of the box with it, okay? And this time, I want to push us potentially out of our comfort zones with this scrappy approach. Because I don't know about y'all, but I love a good scrappy quilt. And that's one of my things that, one of my favorite things about kind of the intersection of modern quilting and traditional quilting is going really scrappy for a modern traditional approach. But it can be a little overwhelming. It changes how you have to follow cutting directions. We're going to talk a lot about that next week. If you're not cutting from yardage, what do you do? Like, how do you make that happen? And how do you hack, not so much hack the pattern, but how do you read it through the lens of, I'm planning to use fat quarters instead of yardage. It takes a little bit of an extra brain step. But once you do it, especially for a block-based quilt like Polaris, once you do it a time or two, it'll set you free. You'll have so many options. Let's see, what did I miss? Lisa says, I'm making the quilt bigger so it will fit a bed. I'm using bright batiks for my stash. Oh, Lisa, that sounds amazing. So excited. I'm glad I'm not the only one who is biting off a big quilt project. Y'all, these prints, I cannot. If you've not fallen in love with Ruby Star Society yet, my entire goal of this quilt-along is going to be to make you fall in love with Ruby Star. I know sometimes folks come in and they're like, I love the fabrics, but I don't know how to use them. I'm going to show you how in this quilt-along. Tiger Mama says, I have Fableism. You did great with these colors. Such a boho vibe. Thank you. I am obsessed with the Fableism fabrics. They're so calming. Like, this is just so calming. It makes me so happy. All right, let's see. Y'all didn't know you were going to get to watch me fold for 10 minutes. This is going to come together so fast. I needed more table space. I needed more table space. Da, 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 da. All right, so if I'm making a color wash, I've paired up the beginnings and the ends, right? Like I've paired up some pinks and I've paired up some purples. And then we're gonna start thinking together about the middle. I do find that to be easier, right? So remember, I mocked up all of these kits when we were putting them together. I was playing around in pre-quilt and dropping fabric in, and I found it so much easier to put the whole thing together if I did the beginning and the end, right? I like formed my bookends of if this corner is gonna be pinky purples and this corner is gonna be purpley pinks. If I got those done, then it made it a lot easier to go through the middle and figure out what I wanted it to look like. And we've kind of done the same thing here. Do y'all remember when I made a shirt out of this fabric way back in the day? That was like 2019. Gosh, that was like almost exactly 5 years ago because it was for my birthday that year. And I didn't know how to make a shirt. And y'all coached me through it on Facebook Live. Wonderful memories. I doubt it still fits, to be perfectly honest with you. A lot has happened since then. And it was a little snug to begin with, but it still hangs in my closet and it makes me smile. All right, so there's our oranges. So let's, if we're gonna start here, right? Are we starting there or are we starting here? We might start here. So if I'm starting there, can y'all see? Yes, you can see that. Okay. And we'll play as though we're doing, we're just gonna lay them, we'll just put them in a row. We're going there. And then remember this pairing, how it has kind of the pinks and the oranges in it. So this one also has some pinks and some oranges. So see how I'm gonna bring that down? I'm like looking at my picture going, how is that gonna work? Yeah, that's gonna look good. So that one also has some pinks and some oranges, and then I can go into more like proper oranges. This one is very hot. Do I have, let's fold some yellows so I can see if I have a yellow that has some hotter colors in it. Because then we're gonna go into kind of these dusty oranges and into some golden rods before we make our way into the greens. And I have a few other fabrics kind of floating here around the edges from more recent lines that we've gotten into the shop. And I will use those / fabric from the shop to fill in any color gaps that I have. Remember, if you got one of our kits, I already laid them out. I made sure you had all the colors that you need. But if you're shopping your stash, this is a great exercise to make sure you have what you want. Because if you end up, if you're like, shoot, I really just need like one stair step right here, you've still got time to order a little bit of fabric and get it in. Let's see. Lydia says, will you be trying to cut and piece so that the prints are right side up, or will you simply let the prints be whatever direction they fall? I am going to let them be whatever direction they fall. You'll notice I did that here. So for example, these stripes are horizontal, and then they're vertical. And it's okay. That doesn't bother me, okay? We know that I'm a bit of a chaos muppet, as evidenced by my fabric explosion on my cutting table right now, right? And prints going funky directions, that does not bother me. If that's going to bother you, excuse me, pick prints that are not so directional, right? Pick prints like this, that if they end up at a funky angle, it really doesn't matter. And it will make your life easier, okay? Oh, I dropped one on the floor. Think of this as like you're putting together a box of paints, right? Or when you open up that kit, it's a little box of paints and you just gotta match them all up. Hello, hello. Lisa, it was so good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. All right, we got some folding done. Now we're gonna be off to the races. Okay, so we've started with these pinks and purples up here. I know you can't quite see all of them. Let me see if I can pull them back so you can see more, right? So we've started here. And we've gotten down to these oranges. And I was looking for a home for this print because I really like it, but it's hot. It's hot, hot, hot. And let's think about where it might fit. that could potentially be a good pair. Maybe one step over, right? So let's put some more, and then this is probably gonna step into that goldenrod family as well. Maybe with this one. And then we've got some lights and darks, right? So I can pair these. See, I'm pulling this color at the background. This color here is very close to this color here. So those will stair step. And then those are still very pink, but that's okay. I think I want to put those and those. Okay. I know y'all aren't going to be able to see all of it at the moment. Bear with me. Then we're going to step here and come down. I'm still not sure about this hot orange. It's a choice. We'll put it that way. It's a choice. But I'm going to stick with it for the moment. Because I think it will blend just fine when we get the whole thing put together. And that's the other thing is, look at this, like this fabric here, and that black up there, they're kind of outliers in this quilt, right? Like those stars have a much darker dark than many of the others. And yet in the arrangement of the whole, it works. So it doesn't have to be rocket science. Again, I'm gonna keep repeating that, but it really doesn't have to be rocket science. Okay, then we're gonna run into an interesting conundrum because I don't have a whole lot of greens. And I'm still not really sure about these prints. So they're gonna get set to the side right now. So I have a lovely little selection of yellows. And then I don't really have green. I have some greeny blues. I have one forest green. So I have some lovely Grellos over here in the shop at the moment. I'm probably gonna end up refiguring this middle bit a little bit with some more colors. But from there, we're gonna head into some blues. So I need some nice bright blues like this, paired with some darker ones. That'll be nice. And then we're gonna head into some of these dusty colors too before we hit our purples. This one may get omitted. I like this one though. There we go. So this hole kind of needs to be filled in. I will get to that. Future Holly Ann will figure that out. All right, and then we're coming into some of these dusty colors. I have a lot of them, so I don't need to use them all. But we're gonna pull a couple. And like this one, I really like that. And I really like that one too. Okay, so those guys will go together. These I'm gonna set aside. And then we're gonna come down into these purples and pinks. And I may end up splitting. Yeah, we'll go there, here. All right. I've got one oddball. Okay, so let me scoot y'all back. I want y'all to be able to see this a little bit better. All right. And I know I'm gonna be standing behind there, and it's gonna be a little upside down for y'all. But hopefully you'll be able to see that we have a nice color progression going here. Like I said, I've got a little bit of the stair step gap here, and since I need more blocks anyway, because I'm gonna make a big giant quilt, that's totally fine. But it comes on down, and we start at those pinky purples. No, we start at those purpley pinks, and we end at these pinky purples. So we can see how it's made this color wash, and I can look at each individual pairing and go, oh my gosh, that block is gonna be so freaking cute, okay? Does that make sense how I did that? Mine had a lot of process to it because I was, folding a bunch of cuts of fabric and deciding which ones to use and which ones to save for something else. But this is the process that you'll go through either with fat quarters from your stash or with your kit in order to start making your block pairings. Now, my recommendation at this point would be to get some Wonder Clips and clip all of these together into your pairs. We'll talk a little bit more about project organization next week when we're cutting, but I like to use big wooden trays to keep my projects organized. And for Polaris especially, I tend, oh, I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. For Polaris especially, I tend to organize block by block because I work scrappy, okay? So go ahead and designate a Wonder Clip to each pairing of fabrics, and that way when we start cutting next week, you'll know what's gonna go together, all right? Any more questions that I can answer before we wrap up our time together today? This has been a long time together. Thank you for joining me and sitting through a long discussion about color and print, as well as this exercise of starting to pair our fabrics up. I hope it has been helpful for you. If you are already signed up for our Quilt-along, you got lots of resources emailed to you first thing this morning. If you are just now joining me, or if you're not sure if you saw the email, I'm gonna put lots of resources up in my stories after this. So stay tuned. It's gonna be a wonderful few weeks together, and I can't wait to help you make a fabulous Polaris quilt. Bye for now. Oh, one more question. Where do you get your trays? Cindy, great question. IKEA. I have one over here, but all my beverages are on it, so I can't hold it up. But it's like big serving trays from IKEA. Yep, great question. All right. Sam, I'm so glad, Samantha, I'm so glad you enjoyed. Thank you, Susan. The marathon will go brilliantly. I feel very good about it. I feel good about my training. Bye for now, y'all. I'll see you next week.